think, are more open to it. It doesn't mean that those who are not young have forgotten about it, but young people are more open to it, because one thing is freedom is a young idea. People think that, you know, so often, those of us who have defended freedom, especially if you talk about sound money, you want to go back to the Dark Ages. You want to go back to the 19th century or the 18th century. And only what we're doing today, you know, fighting these endless wars and printing money and running up debts and expanding the size of government, undermining personal liberty, they think that is progress. You know, the only thing that has ever been progress is the improvement and the development, the understanding of liberty. And that's a relatively new issue. If you think of all of history and all of the world today, it mostly has been run by tyrants. And the notion that individuals are important and governments are supposed to be small and limited to the protection of liberty, that is a new and exciting idea. And I think that is one of the reasons why young people like this idea, because their minds are not muddied up with the conventional wisdom of the politicians and the TV and the media and all the things that they have learned. And they're more open. And too often, as we get older, we are taught to conform. But I think it's a natural tendency to love liberty, whether you're 2 years old or whether you're 16 years old. There has to be a balance, total liberty with disregard to our neighbors. That would not be good. And so there are some rules. One rule is you can have your liberty, but don't hurt anybody, don't steal from anybody, don't defraud anybody. Then you can run your life as you choose, and the solutions would come to us. The other thing we have to understand about liberty is that we can understand it very well for ourselves. Everybody say, yeah, it's my life. I want to run my life as I choose. I want to pick my church as I choose, or no church at all, and I want to read the books that I want. And then they say, but what you have to also conclude is you have to say that my neighbor can do exactly the same. But the politicians get involved, the special interests get involved, and all of a sudden they use government power to squelch the desires of the opposition or the neighbors and say, well, he doesn't lead the most ethical, moral life, so the government is supposed to tell people how they should behave. Of course, if you think about it, and I think about it, because I know a few politicians and I know a few bureaucrats, they're not capable of telling you how to run your life. Acceptance of other when they don't use their life as you think they should, whether it's social, or they spend their money in a different way than you think they should. But that means if you want to legalize liberty and free choices, if they're not hurting people and only involving a risk to themselves, then you have to be a bit tolerant, and you don't have to endorse what they do. Just because you don't want to deal with them, that doesn't mean you endorse their views. So this is so often what happens. If people will say, well, if somebody uses their liberty in a certain way, such and such is going to happen, that means I endorse what they do. Absolutely not. If somebody practices a religion you don't endorse and you disagree with, or if they don't practice a religion, because you protect the right of their free choice, that doesn't mean you endorse what they do. So that's the way it should be across the board. Whether it's economic liberty or social liberty, we accept the fact that you can deal with your spiritual life, your intellectual life, and why should we accept the notion that you should be able to decide what you do with your own body? You know, how you decide how to run your own life. We shouldn't be so judgmental. And if we can accept that, then that provision should be, you know, adapted to saying that maybe we ought to apply the same principles to all foreign countries. You know, we have our shortcomings. Other countries have all their shortcomings, but is it our responsibility, and will it work for us to say, we are the best, we are the champions, we know what to do, and if you don't live the way we do, we're going to invade you and occupy you, and if you want to do our bidding, we'll bribe you and prop up your dictators. If you don't, we'll bomb your countries. No, that is no way to do it if you want to live in a republic and a free society. If we have an exceptional... exceptional nation, and I believe we are, and we have exceptional values. It's not to be used as an excuse to use force and tell other people what to do, whether it's domestically or internationally. And unfortunately, this is what we have done. And if we think we can spread our good values this way, we're making a very serious mistake. If we do our job here at home, protecting our republic, protecting individual liberty, having a free market economy, having sound monetary policy, if we set a good standard, maybe the other parts of the world would want to emulate us. And that is what we should strive for. It would be much better than this notion that we can use force. The rejection of force in a free society is a basic principle that has to be understood. Now, does that mean that we don't have a national defense? Absolutely not. The founders were very correct. They gave us no authority to be the policemen of the world. They gave us strong advice that we should trade and be friends with anybody who's willing to trade and be friendly with us. But we shouldn't use force. We shouldn't get involved in the entangling alliances, like the international alliances today, like the United Nations, NATO. They don't do us any good. Today, by decades now, our presidents, especially since World War II, have decided to go to war not by the consent of the people through their representatives in Congress, but they go to war under UN resolution and NATO resolutions. It's unconstitutional, it's wrong, it's very dangerous, costs a lot of money, and we should hold the feet to the fire of anybody who represents us in Washington. Of course, what does that mean on our foreign policy? It would change big time. It would really change, because we wouldn't be using force. What we would be doing is trying to get along with people. And people say, well, no, there's some really bad people out there. Yeah, that's absolutely true. There are. And that doesn't mean you have to condone it. But it doesn't mean that you have the right, because somebody's running a country 6,000 miles away from us and they're not running it the way they should. It doesn't give us right to do what they call preemptive war. Preemptive war is equivalent to aggression. That is not in the Constitution, it's not good policy, and it ought to be rejected. What should we do with our troops? They should defend this country. They should defend this country, and they do it exactly that way. The troops should be brought home as soon as would be, I think we would be safer, we would be richer, and of course the economy could get a little boost too. Just think if all the military came home within a month or so and they started spending all that money here at home, that would give us a real kick in the economy. Really tired of subsidizing the defense of Japan and South Korea and Germany and getting into these wars in the Middle East. So it is a drain. In the last 10 years, there's been $4 trillion of added debt to us because of the wars that we have been fighting. And what have these wars achieved? You know, we were told so many stories about why we had to go into Iraq. They used 9/11 as an excuse to go into Iraq. Had nothing to do with Al-Qaeda, had nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, nothing to do with our national security being in danger. Thousands of Americans have died, tens of thousands have been severely injured, hundreds of thousands now are begging for help for post-traumatic stress syndrome, as well as brain trauma. And they're not getting the help that they need. And it's almost like it's invisible. People aren't expressing the concern that they should. And yet the policies do not change. Here we hear about troops coming here and moving there and the wars are ending. believe me, so far there's no strong sign that our policies have changed. Policies have to change if you really want to end these wars, and that means a policy of non-intervention overseas and mind our own business. Under a wartime footing, the American people, as all people seem to do, they seem to be more willing to give up their liberties. We certainly seem to do that right after 9/11. But 9/11, I think, in many ways was misunderstood. The Iraq War came out of it, and that was a war they had been planning. I gave my first speech in 1998 against the oncoming war in Iraq because that was our policy change. And domestically, there was a bill floating around for quite a few years, and they wanted to place more controls on our privacy. But there was never enough energy and enough support for it. And when 9/11 occurred, they brought it out and put it in. That was called the infamous Patriot Act, a bill that should have never been passed. That bill shouldn't have been passed. If I have anything to say about it, it would be one of the first things I'd like to do is repeal. Bills like the Patriot Act that allows departments to be set up like Homeland Security and national, transportation at our airports. The abuse that we are accepting at our airports is I think just a horror. We should finally say, groping old women in wheelchairs and little girls and undressing and taking belts off and shoes off hasn't captured one Al-Qaeda member yet. It's only done, it has made us more submissive and more tolerant of government abuse of our liberties. I think we should defend our liberties much stronger than we have been in the past. Yeah. Not only has the TSA been abusing our liberties, but there's been some other things ongoing. I imagine many of you probably have heard about the provision that was stuck in the National Defense Authorization Act. A horrible provision. That provision is what says is that military now can arrest American citizens. The military, that means posse comitatus has been repealed, and not only can they arrest American citizens, and for the vaguest of complaints, if you're what they call an allied force, if you happen to become associated with a group they think they're suspicious of that they might cause harm. So if you visit websites or you get emails or donate money or attend a meeting, you could become a suspect as an allied force. But what they're saying now with the law passed by the Congress, it says the Army can do this, the President can do it with the use of the Army and arrest people and denied an attorney, denied a trial, denied even charges being made and put in prison indefinitely. It says it indefinitely, and even in a foreign prison. That is not the kind of America we should want to live in. That provision needs to be repealed. Yeah. Liberties are easy to be attacked under these conditions, but I have come to the conviction, I hope you share this with me, that there's no need to give up your liberty to be safe. Never. I do not believe you should sacrifice your liberty when you think that the government is going to make us safer. During the campaign, probably the issue that comes up the most is the economy. People don't like the war, and they wish it would end, and they know that deficit is a problem. But the biggest concern is the economy, and superficially that I think is a legitimate concern. So it's the understanding of economic policy that is so important, because too often in Washington, everything is demagogue, based on bad issues and bad ideas, and people don't really, in many ways, understand the difference between the various economic theories. We generally know communism is bad and socialism from my viewpoint, is pretty bad, and yet other people say, well, we do need some socialism. And then we ended up with this compromise called economic interventionism, inflationism. If you need money, you print the money. And if you need a fair system, you redistribute wealth. You take money from one group and give it to another. You introduce this notion that government has power to redistribute wealth. Well, guess what? They do that. It's always meant that we're going to help poor people get some wealth. But who gets to redistribute the wealth? The lobbyists. And guess where they redistribute the wealth? From the poor to the rich. It makes no sense. We got a housing program, well motivated by most individuals who supported it. First, it was created by printing money, easy credit, pass it out, and they can buy. Everybody can buy a house. Have programs which says that the bankers have to loan money to a certain group of people, even if they don't qualify. And also, then there were the special deals with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac that gave low interest rate, low interest in a line of credit to the Treasury. It was very obvious from the Austrian School of Economic Theory that there was a bubble there. So I had introduced legislation even 10 years before the bubble burst. It'd say, look, this is what we're working on. We're working on a bubble. And of course, that was totally ignored. But the motivation was strong. We have to help poor people get a house. And some poor people did get a house. They didn't qualify. And people were very happy. It seemed to be working. They buy houses, and it seemed to work because the price of the house was going up. Oh, I can borrow more money against the house. And that seemed to be good, too. People looked like it was a perpetual wealth machine until the prediction came true. The bubble burst. And those individuals who were making money during the bubble formation, those who got involved with the mortgage markets and the derivatives, they were making billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. And the people who were running Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were making millions of dollars in salaries. And so the crisis comes. It's very obvious. The collapse comes overnight. And those who were very much involved in the banking business and the large corporations that were in big trouble, they said, we need a bailout because a depression will come if you don't bail us out. And so Congress rushes back to pass $1 trillion bailout. But then, because of the monetary system, the Federal Reserve, pumped in and circulated $15 trillion worth of funds, bailing out the individuals who had already made so much money. And when they did that, what happened to the middle class? The middle class got the depression. They lost their houses and they lost their jobs. The depression could have come, but it should have come on to people who did all the speculating, were making all the money. They should have gone bankrupt, not
and the Fed.
The interest I've had for many years, as a matter of fact, even early on when I first got involved in talking about economics and ended up going to the House of Representatives, had to do with the monetary system. Because in 1971, on August 15th, that was the day that the last link of our dollar to gold was severed. And I was convinced by the study about Austrian economics that that would usher in an age of too much spending, too much debt, a bubble that would continue to build and a much poorer country. And that is what's happened in the last 40 years. Although 15 years ago, nobody would have believed us. 10 years ago, the real correction started to occur. We've had 34 million new people in this country in the last 10 years and no real new jobs. And today they're telling you, oh, we had good figures this last week. We're recovering. We had 200,000 new jobs last month. But we had 1.2 million drop out. They don't count the people anymore. So there's very good reason to be very suspicious of any statistic that the government gives us because they will receive. The unemployment problem isn't nearly as severe as many of us believe, but they all say there's no inflation. Inflation measured by rising prices. And the reason they do that is to make sure Social Security beneficiaries don't get any increase in their benefits. But there's a lot of inflation. Talk about the cost of education. If if you want to look at that. Who's going to decide right now on putting away money and having their child educated 20 years from now? I mean, there's no way you can predict. You put away in dollars, I mean, it won't work. There's a lot of inflation in education. There was a lot of inflation with houses. There's a lot of inflation. Where else does government get involved? In medical care. So there's a lot of inflation in medical care as well. If inflation of the money supply was equally distributed throughout the whole economy and everybody's salaries and wages went up, wouldn't be a big deal. It doesn't work that way. Certain people benefited a lot more than others, and they're the ones, of course, who get the power and the control. But inevitably, in a society that deliberately depreciates the value of their currency by printing too much of it, there is an automatic transfer of wealth from the middle class to the very wealthy. Because they get to use the money first. Governments benefit, they print it and spend it, and the big corporations get it, the banks get it, foreigners get it because we send all the aid over to the military-industrial complex gets it, but then in a year or two or three this money circulates, and guess what? Prices go up. And who pays it? Middle class pay it. Do you think the rich care about gasoline going from $3 to $4? They don't care. But a 33% rise in your gasoline prices, your heating bills, your medical care bill, or your education, it devastates the middle class. The great thing about a sound money system and free markets and property rights, and that we enjoyed, and we enjoyed the best ever, and we had the largest middle class ever in the history of the world, and the wealthiest middle class ever. But they can't tell us that now because even the wealth that is apparent today is based on debt. And this is the reason people aren't feeling good about it, because not only do they know about the debt, and they know the failure of government. Even those who believe in these programs know, we can just solve this all if we just raise taxes, and then we can take care of the people who have these needs. But people are starting to realize, young people, I get usually a pretty good reception than when I offer to young people in order to get through this transition and get a better system. Just to let the young people opt out of Social Security if they want. If they're under 25, I let them get out of Social Security. Yeah. Within that $1 trillion I offered to cut, I do have priorities. Matter of fact, I would want to cut the overseas spending, number one. Why can't we bring everybody? Conservatives and liberals and independents and everybody together on saying, why don't we take care of our people at home when we're broke? Even though some of these programs are not technically constitutional and they're literally facing bankruptcy, I think if we work our way out of it, you don't have to attack child health care or Medicare or Social Security if we did the right things. But the whole problem is nobody wants to cut anything out of the militarism. Republican or Democrats, liberal or conservative, they keep thinking that it's an absolute requirement. And yet history is replete with all the examples of great empires that have gone by with their wayside because they extended themselves too far overseas. And just think of what the Soviets did just in recent history. I mean, they were so foolish they went into Afghanistan. They thought they could occupy Afghanistan. So here we are doing the same thing, and of course, I think we have to cut the spending. That's why I offered to cut 5 departments. But I think if we did it deliberately, we could work our way out and take care of the people who are truly needed. We're all going to be needy. Even the wealthy are going to suffer because there will be not only economic chaos, there's going to be political chaos that's already existing in Europe. Europe is in a little worse shape than we are. They expect the next shoe to fall in Europe. But guess what? Bernanke has already gone to Europe because people are still taking our dollars, which means the greater burden on the American people. He's promised that he's going to bail them out. The banks banks are in trouble. They still own derivatives. The debt is still very big. But the foreign banks, which are branch banks of ours frequently, they bought up this Greek debt and this other sovereign debt that's not worth anything. But we say, okay, we can't let this crisis build, so we're going to bail them out, which means the burden is always falling on the U.S. dollar and the U.S. economy and the American taxpayer. And that's why just the thought of restoring a national sovereignty and having a national currency backed by gold would be so much better. Certainly a lot better than what is being planned, because those who are in charge know exactly what we know, and they are planning a new currency. But they're planning to make it a paper currency under the control and the power of the United Nations and the IMF. What we need is a firmer understanding and a conviction about freedom. Because if you truly believe in freedom, you believe in the free market, you believe in property rights, you believe in contract rights. Some people accuse us and say, oh, if you people had it your way, there would be no regulations whatsoever. No, the regulations would be about the market and property rights. The regulations wouldn't have allowed to bail out these corrupt companies who were really bankrupt. They should have gone bankrupt if the regulations were market. There's a lot of room for optimism, because there's a new generation now joining another group of people who have been clinging to the belief and the conviction about what America was all about. There's the great need, the apparent failure of all these programs, the failure of the monetary system, the failure of our foreign policy. It is out in the open. The only question is, are we going to express ourselves and tell them we have some alternatives that will be part of the American system? We don't have to go backwards. We can take what we've had in the past and build on it, improve on it. And this little test that we've had for a couple hundred years in this country, the greatest test, we need it reversed, because I think in the last 100 years we've been going in the wrong direction. We need to stay what we really believe. Samuel Adams' quote about a tireless, irate minority is what we need, because it's that minority. You don't need the majority vote immediately. You need a minority that's willing to go out, say, and vote and get in caucuses and do the things necessary that has to be done. But we also, by doing this, we continue to make these brush fires of freedom in the hearts and minds of men. This is what has to be done. What the American people want is the type of government we want. We've been too careless. We've been thinking about the materialism that comes from a free society and forgot about where production comes from. So this is what's happening right now, a revolutionary approach and ideas. The younger generation and those who believe this in the past are saying, yes, that we can't depend on the government. We should limit the government, expect the government to have a full-time job protecting our liberty, not undermining our privacy. Today, they destroy our privacy and they protect their secrecy. We need more openness in government, especially with the Federal Reserve.
And the Federal Reserve!
But if in a free society, our personal goals hopefully should be that we as individuals should strive for excellence and virtue. What we have allowed is our government to assume they know what is excellent and what is virtuous, and in doing that, they undermine our liberties. Governments cannot protect us against ourselves, and this is what they try to do. When they deal with the way they think you should spend your money or what you should do in your social behavior, that means they think they know what is best. Does that mean everybody would be virtuous and work for excellence? No. But when government does it, they destroy liberty, and guess what? They almost always make the mistakes on what they think is best for you. So this is an opportunity that we have now. That energy is there. The number of people in this country are growing by leaps and bounds. It is so different than it was 20 years ago 25 years ago when I started, so much different than 4 years ago, so much different since the crisis has hit. The people are sick and tired, and they see there's an end point. The answers can be found in our traditions. The answers can be found in this concept of liberty. Join us in this effort. We can restore